Good evening, everybody. So I'm here at the farm in the shop, and I'm going to be doing couple mods to the new Colorado ZR2. And on the list today is some extreme winter preparations. I have some pad warmers that we're going to throw on the oil pan and the transmission pan, and then I also have an extension for the block heater because currently the block heater exits up by the hood and we want to bring it to the front along with the other ones. So I'll walk you through hopefully most of the install today of what I'm going to do. I already got the ZR2 up here on ramps with some jack stands underneath it, and we're going to crawl underneath, and basic tools and pretty basic supplies. I'll show you what I'm going to do. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so supplies. What am I using today to do this? Not a whole lot. These are my pad heaters. There's a outdoor rated extension cord to extend my block heater. We just need some zip ties and then some high temp silicone or RTV. The pad heaters that you buy, the ones I buy anyways, these are Canadian Polar pads. So Canadian company, obviously. I don't know if they're made in Canada or not, but anyways, they come with the silicone heater pad. And they also come with a container of RTV, high temp RTV too, to install it. So, and then I just have caps for the ends of the plugs because they will be exposed and outside of the vehicle. So pretty basic. I'll show you why I do that and how we install it. All right, so let's take a look at the heating pads themselves. Like I said, this one's from Canadian Polar Pad. I believe they're out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. How many people know where Winnipeg is? Funny thing about these pads is if you look online for people installing them, I think almost all the videos are just Canadians installing them. And there's actually good reason for that. Probably 95% of people in North America, if you're watching from North America, don't need to do this. I would only even consider installing these if you live in a very cold climate. So for me, I live in the northernmost metropolitan city in North America, so sorry, picking things out of my toque. Oh, this is such a Canadian video. I said toque. So I live in the northernmost metropolitan city in North America. So I'm in the 1% of the population of North America that's this far north that we get extreme winter cold. So when I say extreme winters, I would say we're getting minus 30, minus 40, and with wind chills, we can get even into the minus 50 degrees Celsius. So that's what I would consider extreme cold. If you are living in a region where most of the lower 48, with the exception of some places, like Montana, North Dakota, if you don't get below minus 10 Celsius, definitely don't need to do anything like this. For me, I install these simply as just a longevity and precaution. It helps the truck start a lot easier, your car start a lot easier. It keeps the oil warm, which is the whole point. So the oil is, when you get to minus 40, a lot of oils, they're designed to be, they're fine down to minus 10, minus 20, minus 30. When you start getting to minus 35, minus 40, most oils just turn to a really, really molasses-like sludge. And so when you go to start your car, a lot of people in Canada, if they don't take any precautions, they find out their car doesn't start. Or it starts and it's really, really, really loud when it starts. And that loud noise coming from your engine is all the metal moving parts moving without any oil, because the oil is stuck at the bottom of the oil pan, thick as molasses, and it's not moving through the engine compartment. So that whining noise that you hear is your engine just running with almost no lubrication. So how do you mitigate that? Park in a heated garage or a heated shop or a block heater. Block heater is the most common thing. Dealers and the shop will install, a dealer and the manufacturers will put block heaters in the car, and I think those are a great idea to use a block heater. I had experience with these basically with my last car. So my car is an Audi A3. And a lot of the German cars don't have the option for a block heater. So there's nowhere to install a block heater on the block itself. So you're out of luck. You either have to park inside, or what I did is you put a pad heater. So I put the pad heater on the engine oil pan, and I've had that on my car for 10 years, just over 10 years now. and really helps starting up in cold weather. So when to use it. This truck, the Colorado, does have a block heater. So 9 times out of 10, when it gets cold, I'm probably just going to be using the block heater. And you'll see when I wire these up, I'm not going to wire them all to one plug because I want the modularity of being able to just use which ones I want depending on the conditions and the situation at the time. So when it gets to -30, -40, that's when I'll probably plug these guys in. So up to about -15, -20, I'll probably just be using the block heater for cold starts, which is great. The block heater sits in, most of them sit in a freeze plug in the engine block, and they're heating the coolant. And then by heating the coolant, you heat the block, and the oil warms up a little bit as well. These are much more effective at just heating the oil itself, so getting that like lubrication right off the bat. So I'm going to have one on the oil pan, and I'm also going to put one on the transmission pan. Again, these are really low wattage ones. If you didn't have a block heater, I would probably get, on my car, I think I have a 125 watt pad, which is a fairly decent wattage one. These ones are only 75 watts. So I specifically got really low watt pads because I have the block heater. And if it's -40, like I said, I'll probably plug in the block heater and I'll plug in the pad heater for a couple hours before I do a start. And plenty of experience with my car. Starts like a warm summer day, even when it's -40. And heat comes on really quick, and you're getting that lubrication in the motor right off the bat, which is ultimately leads to not just being not stranded and not being able to start your car, which is very common with people here when it gets that cold, but also longevity and the life of your engine. It'll just last longer just for wear and tear reasons. It's pretty common where I live that when it gets to that cold, there's cars stalled on the side of the road, there's cars in parking lots, at the grocery store, at work, in the parkades, and they're all stalled and nobody can start them because those people don't change their batteries, they don't plug in their car, they don't have a block heater, they sometimes don't change their oil all that much, they have really old oil in there, and yeah, those cars, when you get to that temperature, they just don't start. And it's really hard on your car too. So I'll go over a couple other misconceptions about block heaters and heating pads while I'm on the topic. A lot of people will just install trickle chargers on their batteries or just boosting their car all the time when that happens. That's great, that works. So when you go to start your car in -40 and it doesn't start, the reason for that is because the oil is so viscous that the crank can't actually turn all that well. So your starter motor is trying to turn the crank, but it's so hard turning that crank that it can barely do it. So a lot of starters, they don't have the power to do that, so you get the dead battery. So you just drained all the amps out of your battery trying to force that crank over in that sludge-like oil. So a lot of people's solution to that is, oh, I just need more power to the battery and more power to my starter, and then I'll force that crank over, right? That'll work. It'll start the car. It's still not solving the problem, though, of that being really hard on your motor. So you're still not going to have the lubrication in the motor if you just force your starter to turn the crank on your engine block, right? So if you really care about your car, go for the solution that's going to warm the coolant, warm the block, warm the oil. And then you won't actually need to use trickle chargers and battery heaters, and you'll never need to boost it. I've never had to boost my car for more than 2 decades now, but that's because I generally am prepared. I do boost cars, but it's always boosting coworkers and friends and random strangers. So there's my long spiel about, I think the topic I would call it is extreme winter car maintenance. The other thing you can do is just make sure your battery's topped up all the time, as in make sure you have a new battery. Where I live, every 5 years, replace your battery. That'll really help too, to make sure you have enough power as well. So let's get started. As you can see, the pad's really small, not that big, which is perfect because the oil pan on the Colorado is very small on the diesel on the very bottom. The pan itself is a very small flat surface. So the key with these is you want to find a flat surface, and you want to install them at the lowest point of where the oil is collecting when the car is off. So when you turn your car off, the oil is going to be at the bottom of the oil pan. It's going to be at the bottom of the transmission pan. The premise basically does apply to anything with oil. So yes, there's a front differential, transfer case, and a rear differential in the truck as well. Same thing applies, though that oil gets cold too. I have never explored putting a pad or heater on the differentials or the transfer case. It's a little bit more complicated because the axle's moving and stuff in the rear, so you got to have slack in the cable to allow for that to happen. Something I thought about but haven't done it yet. So for now, I'll just be doing transmission and engine oil pan. So let's climb underneath the truck, and we'll start running these cables, and I'll show you how I do it. All right, so here we have the front of the Colorado. Got the hood popped. So first thing you wanted to do, or I wanted to do, is I want to look where I want to run the cables. There's a lot of fancy options that you can do for this. Some people run them out the top of the hood, which is an option, and you can plug it in up by your mirror or the windshield. Another common option, especially when you have multiple heating devices like pads or a battery warmer or trickle charger and your block heater, is people will put a splitter together and they'll just put one plug on the front somewhere. Typically the front is where you want it because where you park, you nose up to where you have access to a plug-in power, and that's easy to plug it in. I personally like having all the plugs separate, and you're going to see I'm not going to use a splitter device and have a surface mount plug-in, which you can do, which is really slick, but I'm not going to do that. Just because of that modularity, I want to be able to plug one or all three in, depending on what I want to do, without having to incorporate switches or anything. So I looked at the front of the truck, and I kind of picked out, I don't want anything down too low where the skid plate is. Just in case it catches on stuff, it's going to catch more debris. Also, because the truck is a little bit higher than a standard car, you have to bend it over and kind of reach under the truck quite a bit to plug it in. So I kind of settled on usually the bottom of the grill, pick a spot in the bottom of the grill. And I kind of settled on, there's these pockets right in the corner here, and there's just enough space to get cables in and out, including the plug ends, which is handy, right on the corner at the bottom of the grill here. So I decided I'm going to run my cables out right here. So that's going to be the block heater cord, the transmission pan heater, and the oil pan heater. And I'm going to have 3 little plugs right here. And in the summertime, you can tuck them in and tie them back. And in the wintertime, you just pull them out a little bit for use. So I'm taking the pad end of the cord, and we'll just feed it down here. Lots of just finicky work, messing around, getting your knuckles scratched with this. Light. Unfortunately, I don't have a lift, which would be nice. So we're back to crawling around. So I've pulled it through here. So I've already routed the extension of my block heater down to this point, and I need to get it up. So I'm going to actually just use this as a fish tape right now to pull the block heater cord back up. So let's do that. So this is the underside chassis of the Colorado, under the chassis of the Colorado ZR2, or ZR2 if you are Canadian. I know everyone likes to make fun of that. So right here we have the oil pan. So this is the very bottom of the diesel 2.8 liter oil pan. Here's the drain plug here. There's a little hole in the skid plate. A little further back, this is the oil pan of the 6-speed automatic transmission right here. So we're going to be putting, slide my light. So I'm going to be putting this pad right on the bottom of the transmission pan here. And this guy here is going to go underneath the bottom of the oil pan here. And then the cables are going to run here above the skid plate to the front bumper. Making sure to keep all your cables out of the, I'm going to keep all the cables out of the way, obviously. So let's come in for a closer look. So underneath the diesel Colorado, the 6-speed transmission pan is right here. And if you look right here, excuse the cables in the way. So if you look here, above the skid plate is the oil pan. And this is the oil pan plug, drain plug. So because this skid plate on the ZR2 is in the way, I'm going to drop this skid plate just to get better access to putting the pad on this pan. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So unfortunately, I'm not in my garage again, so I don't have all my tools with me. So if you're going to ask me why I'm not using an impact, well, that's because my impact is not here. But I do have a drill. Should help with these a little bit. There we go. So I don't need to take this one completely off just yet. And we have good access now to the bottom of the oil pan. So after you take the mid skid plate off the truck, you'll see a good access now. This is the front differential, and here's the engine oil pan. So really small little pan. Good thing these pads are just the right size. Should work out just perfect. They're nice and small ones. These come quite large. When you get a 125 or a 250, they're quite large, which every vehicle is going to be different. So it depends on what your oil pan looks like on your car. And of course the transmission pan here. All right, hopefully you can see. Hopefully my big head doesn't get in the way. Let's get this one out of the way for a second. So once you have your routing figured out, go look at your placement, and I'm gonna put this one right like this, right here. So there's a adhesive 3M backing on the back of these, and you might be wondering, whoa, you gotta read the directions and sand the paint off the oil pan first to get a nice clean surface. You can do that if you want. I've never done that, and like I said, I've had this on a few cars and never ever had a problem doing it this way. So should have brought paper towel underneath with me. That's okay. So if you want to sand off the paint off your oil pan, you can go ahead. I've never done that. I usually just put a little bit of the sealant on the pad itself, like so, and then go ahead and look at your placement and where you want it. So I'm pretty happy with this location. So as you can see, the adhesive helps you stick it on. And then you just really want to give it force. You can roll it on if you want. You just want to have good contact. Especially on the edges and the corners. So the nice thing about these is, yeah, you know what, it might rip off one day, or unlikely in this scenario, it's under the skid plate, but if you have it hanging on your oil pan and you don't have any skid plates and the oil pan is the lowest point, which is a lot of cars that is the case, yeah, you could scrape it off, but These things are very inexpensive. So the good thing about them is for less than $100, you just buy another one and you can put it on again. So okay, so you can use a putty knife or whatever you have handy. I have had good luck just using a piece of cardboard. So I just have a small piece of cardboard that I'm going to use. And basically you're going to want to use the sealant. You know what? I'm going to get a piece of paper towel. There's a little bit of better. I don't mean to make this seem like a tutorial. I don't like doing tutorials. I don't know what I'm doing. Don't trust me. And this is where, if you're an artist, you can spend a lot of time making it perfect. We are not going to make it perfect. We're just going to have the goal of sealing up the edges. So if you just seal up the edges, you're going to prevent moisture from getting up and around and underneath the pad itself. And obviously it helps it stay adhered to the pen. Let's see if I can get a different angle here. Tell you that new furnace is nice to have. You can hear it running in the shop. And usually I like to get it around the cord a little bit here, right underneath it. There we go. Looks pretty good. That's the beauty of the cardboard. pretty good. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. A little bit on my fingers here. All right, so I'd call that good. It's stuck on. They say if you turn it on to heat it up, it activates the adhesive a little better too, and we'll do that when we're all done here. So that's one done. Now on to the next one, which I'm gonna run right past the oil pan to the transmission pan here. So we'll adjust for a better view. Okay. All right. So we're on to the next one. It's the transmission one. Again, you want to put it on the lowest point, or I'm going to put it on the lowest point, and I'm going to put it right here. Take the backing off. Put some sealant here. I don't know, I view the adhesive backing as temporary. I don't think that's gonna hold in the cold, so you definitely want to put adhesive on the pad itself. I think at -40 that adhesive is gonna get mighty stiff. So we'll try and make this look as neat as possible. Install it right here. And yeah, you don't want to cook your oil, but when it's -40, I think a lot of people haven't experienced -40. -40 Celsius is like really cold. And if you saw how a car whines when you start it in -40, you would understand that this is not, if you only plug this in -40 or -30, you are not going to cook anything. It's going to struggle just to heat up the oil a little bit. It's not going to cook it, it's not going to boil it. If you installed this when it was above zero, yeah, potentially, you don't want to do that, that's bad. Only plug this in extreme colds. So while the transmission, I guess one of the symptoms, if you live in a cold climate and you start your car and you go to drive it when it's cold still, if you ever notice that the shifts are very slow or very clunky, or it's very stiff, or sometimes it will skip a gear, again, that's because your transmission oil is cold, and your differential, or your any of your drivetrain if you have an all-wheel drive vehicle or something. But yeah, basically that's the gears in your transmission without any oil, because it's all sitting here like jello at the bottom of the pan. So talking about these two, you can get ones that are not grounded. I find a lot of the ones on Amazon, you can see they don't have a ground. I don't know, I feel more comfortable if it has the ground. So the brands that I always see that have the ground are this brand, which is Canadian Polar Pad, which I've personally used on my last car. So I know it works okay with no issues. And then also the, I think they're called CATs. think it's the Cat's brand. Those ones seem to be grounded and look to be decent quality as well. I think the only thing you'd have to worry about is if they're using a really cheap cord too. The whole point of these is they are being used in extreme cold, so if they don't use a good quality outdoors cord, the plastic or the insulation around the cable is going to be stiff, and that can crack when you go to plug it in all the time, right? So this is nice, flexible, soft, outdoor rated cable. You can totally tell that they didn't cheap on the cord itself. So I'd stay away from those really cheap ones, those made in China ones. The cord does not seem all that great. And how do I know? I have one of those, and I can show you later. I'll show you the difference in the cord temperature compared to this one. So there we go. This looks a little better than my one on the oil pan, so that's good. Practice makes perfect. Right, so nice and close up here. This is the transmission pad heater. Attached, and go forward a little bit to the front of the truck. That's my oil pan heater. And then we're going to run the cables up to the front of the truck here and out the bumper. So my next task now is to just use zip ties and zip tie the cable up and out of the way, making sure to be clear of any moving parts or anything that's warm. Exhaust obviously is here. I have front axles here too, so you want to avoid all the key points, and I'll do the best to do that. So there you have it. There's the front of the grill, and here's my 3 cables that come out, which this one's quite long. This is obviously the oil pan one because it's a little closer, but that's good. I don't want the slack back there. I want it up here, and we're just going to shove it in here, whatever we don't need. So I don't have a paint pen on me, but I'm going to get a paint pen and just mark which one's which. I can tell by the cable type that this is my extension, my block heater cord, but these two are identical. So this one's oil pan, this one's transmission. Surprisingly, these caps are really hard to find in my area. I like to cover up the caps. You don't have to. Honestly, I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. They're going to oxidize and get a little corroded no matter what. But it's nice to just keep them covered if you can anyways. So here's the front of the grill. If I didn't tell you where they were, you wouldn't be able to see them, but here they are. So you can see the cables come up here, attached it to the grill just on the corner, and then I feed them back in and just tuck them in. And no, they're not blocking any of the radiator. I know that's, you don't ever want to, even as minor as it is, you don't want to affect the cooling of your vehicle. There's actually a plastic panel. You can see it's solid there, so they're just in front of that plastic panel, and the radiator is up here. So there's the front of the truck again. Front of the truck, and all the 3 plugs come out right here on the corner. Pretty low-tech solution. Like I said, I don't like having them spliced together with a splitter or connected together with a splitter. Alright, so I got the cables all run. You saw me attach the pads to the pans, and now all I have left to do is check the wiring again, just make sure the runs are clean. So I'm going to crawl back under, and I'm going to put the skid plate back on. Okay guys, that's a wrap. I'm pretty much finished here. I'm just gonna zip tie and clean up the extension of the block heater cable inside the engine bay, and then that's finished. Skid plates back on. It's all run. I'll test them out to make sure they work, and then we're good to go. Some good preparations for some extreme weather. Again, most people probably don't need to do that, but hey, if you live in a climate like mine, it's not a bad idea to try out. I think final thoughts and why I like to do this is so you're not the guy that needs help. You can always be ready to go at any moment. Your car is always ready to go when you need it to go. You don't want to be in an emergency and have to try and get in your car and it doesn't start because it's so cold in the middle of the winter. So it's a time when there's enough people that need help and you don't need to add to the problem in those situations. So be one of those people that's always prepared and you're not a burden for anyone else, and then you can also have the ability to help others. So I hope you guys like the video. I'll be doing some more basic mods to this truck. Nothing too crazy when it's brand new, but just basic things like this I'll keep doing to the truck, and I'll try and make videos when I can. Anyways, have a good night. Take care. See you later.